Much has been said and written about the Freemasons in Europe, such as the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and the United Grand Lodge, situated at Great Queen Street in London, the Great Queen being Semiramis, also known as Isis and Diana. Yet very little is known or even spoken about regarding Islamic Freemasonry, a system that may predate Islam itself, and even connecting back to the mystery schools of Cairo in Egypt. From the time of Mohammed, the Islamic faith has fractured, splintered and fought amongst itself, as all faiths appear destined to do. In the late 1970s, a series of comics were released that featured information from an alleged former Jesuit, Alberto Riviera. In this series, Riviera revealed what he claimed to be a connection between the Roman Catholic Church and the creation of the Islamic faith itself. Muhammad was raised by an uncle after being orphaned at a young age, and was praised for his honesty and ethics at the time. Muhammad's first wife, Khadija, was the daughter of a noble tribe. Riviera claimed that Khadija was secretly a Catholic nun in an Arabic monastery. It was a cousin of Khadija, who was a high-ranking Christian, that is claimed to have been the link back to the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican. Muhammad married Khadija in his 20s. In 1610 CE, at the age of 40, Muhammad claimed to have his first revelation, visited by the angel Gabriel whilst on a retreat in a cave near Mecca. It is from this encounter that Muhammad says he received the first revelations of the Quran. Was there really a connection between the Roman Catholic Church and the creation of the Islamic faith? The controversy surrounding Riviera, including from his own account, time in a psychiatric hospital in Spain, an institution he says he was sent to by Jesuits to recant his faith, make this a controversial topic to say the least. Whatever the truth about the origins of the Abrahamic faiths, there is one thing I am certain of. They are being pitted against each other to bring about a mutually destructive Third World War. Author LeoZagami joins me today to discuss his new book, Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 10, Islamic Freemasonry and the Secret Societies Behind the Eternal Conflict in the Middle East. Now, this is difficult and complex information to discuss, but one I feel is necessary to cover if we are to have any chance of understanding the full agenda of the global death cult. Hi guys, welcome to this week's Classified here on Ickonic.com. I'm here with LeoZagami. Now, Leo hasn't been on for about a year and a half, I think, since the show. He's got a new book out, which is Illuminati. It's the Confessions of Illuminati, Volume 10, could you believe? But it also is a very controversial topic that right now, obviously, with the conflicts in the Middle East, in Gaza, between the Muslim nations and the Zionists and all that goes with that, and what could be going on in the background. My kind of belief is that maybe the three Abrahamic religions were started off to come to this point and blows anyway. There seems to be a design here to have an East versus West conflict that maybe ended up in World War III. I'd like to run that past Leo, who's got far more knowledge than I'll ever have of this. He's not former Illuminati or former Freemason. He's a non-practicing Illuminati and a non-practicing Freemason now. He's living over in the US. Thank you for joining me. This is an incredibly controversial topic, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I think it's also a very timely topic that needed to be exposed right here, right now, with what we are living. You see, I actually had in mind to write this book for many years due to my past personal experiences with Islam, with the Middle East, with Turkey. But I wanted to be really driven also by by an input of some kind. And I must say that when I started writing, it was right at the beginning of October of 2023, and the events of the 7th of October took place. I saw that as a sign that I was on the right path with this book and with the topics I chose to include in this book, which are basically Islamic Freemasonry and also all the secret societies of the Middle East and their involvement with this eternal conflict that I think that the Third World War is actually something that is already in motion. It's just an enlargement maybe of the Third World War, and this might always be the pulsating heart of it all, because yes, we have various possible theaters of war, including of course Ukraine and maybe Taiwan, but when it comes to the Middle East, this is a conflict that predates all the present conflicts by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, it's been going on for over 1,000 years since Islam was created. There's been a conflict in the air. So that's been also the instability of the Middle East, this continuation of maybe ancient traditions under different disguises with Islam, but confronting each other. So the Muslims separated each other immediately after the death of the Prophet between Sunni and Shia, but then the Shia had many other schisms, and the products of it might even become exterior altogether to Islam in the most traditional sense, like with the Druze and other groups. So I would say that this book is very important, most of all because people have been talking about the Illuminati and Freemasonry for so long, trying to expose every single element without really addressing the roots, because the roots are in the Middle East. They are nowhere else. You just have to study the rituals of these secret societies to understand that the roots are in the Middle East, and that the modality that was acquired in Europe was acquired from countries like Syria, Iran, Iraq, present day, because then back in the days, you know, it was ancient Sumeria. So these are countries that really, and ancient Egypt, that really influenced so much the history of secret society. And I found it quite incredible that in the last really 100 years since Edith Miller, Lady Queensborough, all Nesta Webster, there has not really been a proper discussion on topics like, for example, the Cairo Lodge and, of course, various branches of Islam and their, of course, relationship with the Freemasonry and the Illuminati. Illuminati is, of course, a word that I don't only use for Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati, but a variety of mystery schools. However, even Adam Weishaupt forced his own Minervals to learn the Persian months, the name for each month, and they actually had a problem with that because people in Germany couldn't really spell these names, and in the end, I think Weishaupt gave up on that idea of also embracing in his mind. He wanted to embrace also more of the Zoroastrian rituals, but then we have also, of course, other fraternities, other secret societies linked with Islam, including the Rosicrucians, which are, to some extent, for some, the original Illuminati. We see a constant here. It's always Germany, Germany in the Middle East, Germany in the Middle East. You know? There is this kind of link, which seems a bit to resurface from time to time, and eventually would manifest in the monstrosity which is National Socialism, Nazism. So I think that it is really important nowadays with the growing anti-Semitism, what is happening in Gaza, that, by the way, used to be the second most important fortress of the Knights Templars after the Temple Mount, and used to be on top of that the holy city of Nathan, of the Sabbateans. That was Nathan of Gaza declared. Nowadays, people focus very much on the Knights Templars, and they know, of course, how their demise was also problematic for the Catholic Church, because some very weird things happened in the interrogations, where some things that were discussed, some topics, made it made the Catholic Church understand that these people were not compatible with their creed. So what they were really doing, were they worshipping some mysterious head, some mysterious Baphomet. That's what came up in all this all this process. So only now that we have archaeological evidence, I brought this evidence up in my book, and I finally was able to show you the real Baphomet, the Baphomet that precedes the Eliphas Levi depiction that is so popular nowadays and that is used by the satanic temple that parades that statue around the Capitol Hills of America. No, the Baphomet is actually more like Michael Page and Richard Lee and the authors of that very important book, Holy Blood and Holy Grail, announced in the 80s, connected to Mohammed and the actual interpretation of Mohammed gradually in the Occitan language, or in French as we know it today, gave birth to this Baphomet. But of course, when it comes to Baphomet, we connected also to Aleister Crowley. But Aleister Crowley himself was very much entrenched with Islam, was completely absorbed by Islamic studies. And eventually his revelation, his book of the law, was revealed to him in Cairo, Egypt, which is not a coincidence. Let's not forget, Aleister Crowley was a member of various secret societies, but he was also from time to time working with the British intelligence. The British intelligence had its interest in infiltrating these secret societies and manipulating them against each other, just like the Knights Templar, original Knights Templar taught them, because Great Britain dominated by Freemasonry, and Freemasonry, part of Freemasonry says or claims that they are inheriting the Templar tradition. They, of course, inherited also that tradition, that ancient history, which is taught to the Knights Templar, which is taught, sorry, the modern Knights Templar, which are within Freemasonry. When they get, for example, into the 30th degree of Freemasonry, you start to understand how the Templars were actually collaborating with the Assassins. Great Britain was behind two things. That is, when you arrive to the 33rd degree, you see this eagle with two heads, no?
Yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah.
So you are playing God here. You're playing with one side and the other. So what did the United Kingdom do? They promoted at one point incessantly what became known as British Israelism. British Israelism basically became the basis in which the future Windsors, the Hanoverians, managed to gradually convince a large amount of the British population that British Israelism, the modern Jews, are not the historical Hebrews of biblical Israel, but rather the British are like some kind of lost tribe of Israel. At the same time, they encouraged more and more the Jews to go back to Israel. And we discover, in fact, that Sabbatai Zevi's father was involved with what we can say was a form of, was the British intelligence, because British intelligence, of course, is born with Sir Francis Bacon and before that, so it was already in motion. And when they were expanding their vast empire, their idea was to basically bring back the Jews to the Holy Land. And this idea actually was absorbed to some extent by Sabbatai Zevi and by his prophet, Nathan of Gaza, who for the first time functioned as the modern Zionist, inviting all the tribes of Israel to go back there because they had to recognize Sabbatai Zevi as the Messiah. Then at that point, they nominated Gaza as the holy city of the Sabbateans. I mean, that in itself meant doing a ritual which has cursed forever that place, which already had been partly cursed by the fact that it had been a Templar fortress in which Saladin attacked all the people outside of the fortress and killed everybody. So the people that nowadays are parading like a mass through the streets of Gaza, they are you know, saying they are defending, yes, but they were, first of all, they conquered those lands at the expense of Christians or Jews that lived there before. So we have to understand that there is a very rich history. We have to understand all the sides of this rich history. And of course, the responsibility of Great Britain, the United Kingdom, is enormous, as well as the royal family.
I just wanted to read a bit from your book here that sets up what the subject in terms of Vatican and Islam, because most people wouldn't connect those two. So I'll just read this bit from page from one of the pages of your book. So you say, and this is a quote from someone. The latest includes allegations that Muhammad was manipulated by the Catholic Church to create Islam and destroy the Jews and other groups of Christians. And the Muhammad's first wife, I can't pronounce this, I'm going to butcher this, Khadija, was a Catholic nun in an Arabian monastery who was told by a bishop to marry Muhammad and create Islam. Rivera, who was a who has some cartoons.
An alleged Jesuit priest. And now it's very important to understand what you're citing here is actually what the alleged Jesuit Alberto Rivera, who died passed in 1997. He claimed to be a Jesuit, and he claimed to have received this information from Cardinal Bia. Cardinal Bia was a very important Jesuit and one of the key figures of the Second Vatican Council. And basically, he claimed, Rivera, to have received this knowledge from him. And actually, Father Malachi Martin was himself, at one point, before he came to live here in America, the secretary of Cardinal Bea. Cardinal Bea was basically a Jesuit, but he also had Jewish roots. He was a very important figure. But is it true, this story? You see, Alberto Rivera related this story to a religious cartoonist called Jack Chick. And the story became the basis for one of these comic strips dedicated to him. I think there were approximately 6. It was called The Prophet. Now, I tend to be very factual in my work. So I wanted to expose the story to then tell the inconsistencies, but also the consistencies. So there is some elements which are realistic and that are very interesting and should be discussed. Others that should be disregarded because they are unrealistic. Now, the first element here is in this story, in this account that allegedly was given by Cardinal Bea to Rivera, the fact that the Catholic Church was behind Khadija. And so the Catholic Church back then, in the days when Muhammad started to channel what would become the Quran, wasn't really present in those areas, because those areas were traditionally the home of the Oriental churches that were starting to expand and that will eventually become the Orthodox Church of something separate from what we know as the Catholic Church. Christianity, though, had in the first few centuries, as you know, various councils like Nicaea to establish this and that. And gradually then certain churches started to separate from Rome on certain ideas. But it's very interesting, this story, because it brings us to the actual cousin of Khadija, who was himself an Ebionite priest. Now, an Ebionite priest is a very specific form of Christianity. It's not any kind of form of Christianity. This is a sect of Christians within the Jewish world who didn't believe in the divinity of Jesus, as decided, as you know, by Rome, because they had to emulate, of course, the gods of ancient times, and everybody who was somebody in Rome had to be a god. So, you know, if they had to embrace a new religion, they had to. But aside from that, so here we are with the cousin of Khadija, who introduces Muhammad to monotheism, and in that introduction to monotheism is, of course, inserting certain elements that were also present in Gnosticism, like, for example, Docetism, because we see that, for example, in the Quran, Jesus doesn't die on the cross. Somebody else is sent on the cross. There's a transfiguration there, which is typical. And we see, though, that this whole link with the Christianity is actually there. And regarding the Vatican, Rome had at one point transferred its powers, as you know, from Rome to Istanbul, which became Constantinople, which is today the home for one of the most important seats of the Orthodox Church. But at the time, we are seeing also in Cardinal Bear's talk references to do with the pre-Islamic gods, the idols of the moon god that apparently were also found in Israel. I wrote Hazor in Palestine. In reality, I wrote Hazor in Palestine because, of course, it predates the establishment of the state of Israel, viewing it in that way. Some Jews might say I should say Israel, but in any case, they were found, these moon gods that basically have this moon crescent that became then the characteristical sign that
So
we
we're
associate.
talking about pagan gods here.
Moon gods. We're talking about the goddess in particular, Sin, that became Nanna. We're talking about the moon gods, and the moon god in particular, Sin and Nanna, became very important in the center of Haran. Haran was a city, now there is only ruins, it's in present-day Turkey, which has an enormous importance for Hermetica, for the preservation of all the ancient Greek philosopher knowledge. I mean, Haran preserved all the ancient knowledge and managed to preserve it from the destruction of the Muslims themselves. And so this moon god in particular, Haran, became the chief seat of what will eventually will become known as the Sabaeans. The Sabaeans in reality were a name that was found in the Quran. And when, like I tell in my story, when the caliph that were conquering the land in that time went to Haran, he spoke with the people of Haran and said, what religion are you? Because here we recognize Christians, Jews. Of course, when they recognize Christians and Jews, said we are Christian, we are Jews, they were spared their lives, but they then were imposed maybe some taxation that was different from the one imposed to the Muslim population. So they had this kind of thing. But in any case, they said, well, we're gonna call our lawyer. So they were very clever, these people, to call their lawyer, and they said, when you pass after you conquer the rest of your land, you pass by to Haran, later on, we will tell you exactly who we are, religiously speaking. And the lawyer went through the Quran, and he found the Sabaeans. And nobody knew who they were. So when the caliph came back, said, what religion are you? We are the Sabaeans. Who is your god? Hermetes Trismegistus. That was the way in which they preserved this knowledge. And there was a specific brethren, the Brethren of Sincerity from Haran, that then was a group of Illuminati that went to Baghdad and entered into that establishment, which became known all over the Middle East as the House of Wisdom. There were two important establishments in the Middle East that preserved all this knowledge, and they were, of course, emanation of secret societies and forms of what we can say of Freemasonry, but in a Middle Eastern fashion. They went to Baghdad, and they started to introduce this knowledge in this place that is no longer existing simply because it was destroyed by the Mongols. The Mongols destroyed a lot of stuff. There was internal wars between the Shia and the Sunnis. And there were two centers of power in the Middle East that were competing with each other, and centers of knowledge. One was the House of Knowledge in Cairo. The other one was the one in Baghdad, the House of Wisdom. These were two emanations of two different Islamic traditions, but they were equally important. In my book, when it comes down to the connection with between the Vatican and, of course, Islam, what Cardinal Bell is talking about, the pre-existing Islamic, pre-existing, so pre-Islamic gods, are a reality which actually we find mentioned even by Muhammad himself in his famous satanic verses that then became the basis for Salman Rushdie novel. And why they were called satanic verses? Because it seems like out of convenience, Muhammad, he started his own revelation, his own work, you know, with the by first of all marrying a rich older woman, Khadija, had a lot of money, so he could finally dedicate himself to go to a cave and channel what he deemed to be a new holy revelation by Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel, who allegedly gave him this knowledge. Because he married this woman that gave him the economic stability. He then, on top of that, was introduced to the cousin, who was this Ebionite priest. So nowadays, the Islamic world doesn't want to really discuss the Waraq ibn Nawah, who is this Christian who was the cousin of the first wife of the Prophet. Because when you start discussing that, of course, Rivera's account brings it even further, saying that she was some kind of nun, that he was a Catholic. But that is a little bit, you understand, pushing it a little bit. But it needed to be revealed even to the people that want to know more about Islam. This episode of Alberto Rivera has brought a lot of controversy, so it needed to be addressed. However, Barak ibn Nawfal, which is today not so discussed within the Muslim world, was a very significant figure in Muhammad's life. He himself, in the hadiths that report about him, which are the teachings external to the Quran, that are, of course, addressed by qualified and recognized Sunni sources from the more orthodox part of Islam, they recognize that this guy was important, because Muhammad said that he should have a couple of gardens in paradise even. Yep. So, I mean, he was a very important figure. And so why are the Islamic people not making such a big deal about this guy? Why they're keeping him? And why Alberto Rivera, a guy who is allegedly a fraud, but he might have been genuine about his Jesuit involvement, because there is photos that confirm that he was a Jesuit. There is actually a document. So, I mean, there is definitely some confirmation about his involvement. So at that point, one wonders if Cardinal Bell himself had been the victim of some elaborate kind of report that wasn't completely accurate. But there is some accurate elements that only the people who really know Islam could know. When Muhammad finally completes his revelation, the cousin Khadija said, you know, my cousin will have loved to see basically this moment, you know, because this will have made him really happy of what you have managed to deliver to the world with this revelation that happened in the outskirts of Mecca, in solitude, in a cave on Mount Hira. He had started to grow in popularity, his own religious faction in Mecca, but Mecca was a place with 360 idols. And this guy wanted to worship only one God. They said, listen, you are starting to break the balls here. We have a living, we have temples, we have people to feed. You can't continue. And in fact, he had to flee Mecca, and he went to Medina, which becomes the second most holy place of Islam, no? Which is 12 days by, I think, by camel or something. He goes and he establishes his base in Medina until eventually he will put together such a powerful alliance. What Muhammad did was, of course, to return to Mecca, destroy all you know, there is an account of him destroying all the statues, and the whole thing becomes, of course, an epic journey that is, of course, then told by the various Islamic scholars. But
and he would have to had a lot of backing and money behind him to be able to do those things, as you said. I just want to, and as we just established who Riviera was, and I would say it's dubious whether some of this is true or not, but it's still very interesting. You write in your book,
Yeah.
Riviera says in the said publication stroke cartoon, the Vatican wanted to create a messiah for the Arabs, someone they could raise as a great leader, a man with charisma whom they could train and eventually unite all non-Catholic Arabs behind him, creating a mighty army that would ultimately capture Jerusalem for the Pope. I found that fascinating because why would
Yeah.
the Pope be so that people wouldn't connect the Pope, Jerusalem, through the Arabs? That would be the last avenue that I would go down in terms of Solomon's temple and all of this end times prophecy stuff. But there's that avenue there.
Okay. Let's make it very clear. This is important because it gives us the opportunity, first of all, to talk about the Temple Mount, which is at the basis of all of the Islamic claims, and of course also the Al-Aqsa Brigade, the Al-Aqsa Force, the Al-Aqsa War, the Al-Aqsa everything. But guys, Muhammad had been already dead for 5 years, and this account we find in the Quran about his mythical journey in a way with a winged creature that suddenly arrives in the middle of the night in the Temple Mount, and then he's ascending to heaven, talks with all the prophets, and that becomes the basis for the Dome of the Rock and for the Al-Aqsa Mosque and all that. Well, guys, it's a little bit, I mean, historically, it was a companion of the prophet who conquered Jerusalem and took it away from the Byzantium Empire. So, of course, it was a Christian control place. But the problem is that he was dead. So how is it possible that the Quran is claiming that he flied there on the Temple Mount, almost like the whole thing was already established with what we now call the whole, we call in Italy, la spianata delle moschee, basically the base that then also became later on the base of the Knights Templars, because the Knights Templars, when they went with the Crusaders who had conquered Jerusalem, they took their base right there. And you know, of course, that is the allegorical place for Freemasonry, because King Solomon's temple, the base for a temple that is central to Freemasonry. And still to this day, a lot of Neo-Templars groups refer always to that place of importance, and they say, well, when the Templars were here, we let the Muslim pray. One day a Muslim came there, and then he was welcome, and they say, you could pray with us here, you know, in the front. But of course they could pray. We are talking about an alliance that the Knights Templars had with the Nizari Ashashins, which was a part of Islam, against another part of Islam that they were trying to fight, with ultimately kicked their ass, which was Saladin.
I think this is really important, Leo, is that when people do look into conspiracy theories, they tend to try and simplify everything. And it's incredibly complex. It's like a ball of string, isn't it? You said there's one section of Islam in conjunction with the Templars who will maybe learn a lot of their stuff from the Assassins or the Assassins, and then they're against another part, and it's so complex that to whittle it down to this kind of linear story of good versus black, and you can see that black and white flowing, is impossible.
No, it's impossible. And also there is another thing that's very important here, that up until the Crusades, the Christians had absolutely no concept of holy war. No, whatsoever. If you ask a Christian to go and fight for the Bible, he will watch and he will say, "Boh, Christ never said that. Jesus never said that." It became, though, of geopolitical importance, and the Pope saw the expansions of Islam as a threat. And that is another point that Rivera brings up out of the account of Cardinal Bea as a justification for the Crusades. That is what's happening here. The Crusades were inspired actually by the concept of holy war that was created in the Islamic tradition, the ribat. And I talk about it in my book, and I explain how the ribat is basically the establishment of fortresses along the lines of the pilgrims to protect the pilgrims and to protect those who fight the jihad. Nowadays, the ribat is a very popular concept among Al-Qaeda, ISIS, but very few people know that ribat is actually the one that inspires the Crusades, because at that point, all these Middle Eastern people who like to say the evil of the Crusaders of the West and this and the Crusades, because they always remember these Crusades as being something that really was hard times, no? Well, guys, they were inspired by you. They were inspired by the Muslims. If you minded your own business, didn't create a ribat, didn't create this concept like, and didn't create orders like the Assassins, who inspired the Knights Templars, because the Vatican at that point sent their emissaries in the Middle East. And so that there were people there that were fighting for their holy book, giving their life. So the Pope had to sanction that you had to give your life for Jesus Christ and go and protect the pilgrims and fight the war, you know. But
So
this is
in that case, Lou, then when we look back at what Rivera said there about the Catholic Church creating this guy to capture Jerusalem for the Pope, is it kind of like, oh, we've cocked up here, we've messed up, it's got too powerful, we need to bring it down? Because, but you know, there's a contradiction.
Okay, there is definitely a possibility that because the Byzantium territories were moving further away from the traditional Christianity that was operating under the control of Rome, Rome at that point, with the divide and conquer policy and the fact that they wanted to still retain control over those territories, but they couldn't, because the Oriental churches were way too influential. So at that point, they created maybe an opportunity for these Muslims to advance and conquer Jerusalem, so then they could actually say, we will come and free Jerusalem. But unfortunately, for Rivera's account, the only problem is that there is a few hundred years of disparity that happens here. So you have to always take it with but definitely there was in the expansion of the Byzantium, and then of course the fact that they were in charge of a holy see, there was definitely a problematic that you know, Rome could definitely side with Muslims against the Oriental Orthodox churches that were rebelling to Rome. That is definitely something that they will do, because still to this day, when I went to Egypt and was guested by the Boutros Ghali family for over a month in 2003 to make some research, still to this day, I remember once arriving in the house of one of the Boutros Ghali's most important family members and finding all these objects, golden stuff on the table. And I said, what is this? And he was like, because they are the patrons of the Coptic Church, which is considered the most ancient Christian church in the world. And I remember Ralph Boutros Ghali told me, well, this is the stuff that the Vatican sent us the other day. They still want us to kind of, you know, it's like they try to corrupt us. We don't give a damn about this stuff. So the Coptic Church has been has been put into temptation. The people from the Vatican still to this day, I mean, that was 2003, and still there was the Vatican sending them things and objects to try to make them come closer to the Vatican. And then a synagogue that was found in the center of, when you go to the Cairo Coptic district where all the churches are, there is in the center an archaeological discovery of one of the most ancient synagogues. And this synagogue was preserving also a lot of knowledge in regards to the Fatimid dynasty, because after the expansion of Islam, after, of course, the local rulers of Mecca forced Muhammad and a small group of followers to leave the city, but he came back and kicked their asses. At that point, just so your viewers can have a clear idea, Mecca was dominated by the Qurayshite tribe. This tribe didn't like Muhammad, but then once Muhammad established himself, and of course his successors from Abu Bakr, the one recognized by the Sunnis to this day as being the legitimate, they created the first 5 caliphs, which were called the Rashidun caliphs. And the 4th one was Ali. Ali became actually the father of the Shia faction that then split from, but initially he was a recognized caliph also by the Sunni.
So the Fatima, is that the daughter of Muhammad?
Yes, yeah. Ali was the cousin, the flag bearer of Islam, this enormous, powerful knight who married the daughter Fatima. And at that point, the Shia faction recognizes only the descendants of Fatima and, of course, Ali as the legitimate heirs to Islam.
And Shia is Shiite, isn't it? It's the same thing.
Yes, yes. Shia is Shiite, and of course, then the Shiite tradition from the 12er Shia, so this belief in the 12 Imam, then became split up in itself in various factions that gave birth also to the Ismaili, later the Nizari, and the Nizari were the assassins. But all this split up will bring us to the foundation of a very powerful dynasty, the Fatimid dynasty. The Fatimid dynasty that doesn't exist any longer. I mean, their legacy it's now been completely. I mean, we have knowledge of the Fatimid dynasty because, like I said, it was preserved in a synagogue in Cairo, a lot of the history, because they were very tolerant with the Jews, with the Christians, up to a certain extent. Up to a caliph called Al-Hakim. This guy he had this Cairo, this terrible Cairo lodge, as Nesta Webster used to call it. And this Cairo lodge basically was the lodge of reason, of science. They said, for the masses, we give them the religion, the opium, the religion, like Marx would have said. And
is that the wisdom? Is the house of wisdom and the house of
the house of knowledge?
House of knowledge and the house of wisdom. They're kind of.
The house of wisdom is separated. It's in Baghdad, and it was actually the Fatimid never really managed to conquer Baghdad in this. They actually started to try to corrupt and try to see if it was possible. But the Fatimid eventually will be, of course, they will have been fought. They will have basically lose the battle against the Seljuk Turks and the Sunni that will expand, and that will expand so much that then at that point the Sunni will prevail. Nowadays the Shia are a minority. The Shiite are a minority. Nowadays the Shiite, of course, in all their various ramifications, are a minority within Islam.
Yep.
Having said that, though, at the time with the Fatimid dynasty, they ruled most of the Middle East. They arrived even to Mecca and Medina. They arrived basically to control Sicily, the south of Italy. I'm myself, like I explained in my book, a descendant of Zaham from the island of Ali Kudi, which is in the Aeolian Island, which is the Rock of Ali. And Shia were basically an emirate. There was an emirate of the Fatimid dynasty that ruled there for hundreds of years. It's very difficult for people to understand, but the basis for the mafia is Islam.
That would shock a lot of people. That even no one would. Very few people would have made that connection in their mind at all.
Yeah, but the mafia was actually, it was the name of something that, I mean, in my books, I always explain how the origins of the mafia are not what they appear. They definitely have, in the modern times, a lot to do with Freemasonry. They have a lot to do, and so you have Mafia Massia as the name. And then you have also the connection with the acronym Mazzini authorizes furti, incendi, assassini. You have also that. But in reality, if we want to go even back, the Arabic roots of the word mafia include mafi, which means exempted, as in Islamic law, jizya, is the yearly tax imposed to non-Muslims residing in Muslim land. That's why I said before, when it comes to the expansion of Islam, though, there is this thing, they always say expansion by the sword. Yeah, it's partly true, but it's also expansion by convenience, because a lot of people say, I don't want to pay tax. I'm just going to say, Allah, Allah, whatever. I'm going to bow down 5 times a day. I don't want to pay this tax. But if you think about it, what does the mafia do? Goes to a shop and say, you have to pay. It's called il pizzo. So in Sicily, every single shop in every single city or town in south of Italy, not only in Sicily, because then you have the 'Ndrangheta, Sacra Colonna Unita, Camorra, they come to your shop and they say, you have to give us 2,000 euros a month.
Because we've only got 5 minutes left of this, and I just want to get your take on what you think is going on in the Middle East in terms of the Arabs at the moment, and Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I mean, what is going to happen there? Because obviously, they're both the Zionist Jews are being told. Jews are being told everybody hates them, and you're going to get the Arabs told that they're being fostered to an extent. I know I'm generalizing, but they're telling us to hate the Jews. I mean, there's a collision gonna come here. What do you think the outcome is going to come?
The problem always goes back to the Brits. The Brits should apologize from now to eternity from the mess they did in the Middle East by making this alliance with France to then sabotage the Turkish Ottoman Empire that followed the Seljuks and was a period of stability for the whole area. But the Brits were not happy, of course. They employed this Freemason called Jamaleddin Al-Afghani. Jamaleddin Al-Afghani became the father of what is now Salafi jihadism, Salafism, which is not only Salafi jihadism, because then you have also the Wahhabi that are the sponsor of all this jihadism, and they come from Wahhab. But all this was a creation of the Freemasons of England and their intelligence operatives. In my book, I give the names of these people. I mean, Jamaleddin Al-Afghani is called the father of modern Islam, but this guy was a friend of Madame Blavatsky. He was going around the lodges of Europe. He established one of the most powerful lodges in Egypt, and at one point he was initiated in this lodge that was under the United Lodge of England. But the United Lodge of England has a rule: there's no politics or religion in your lodges. So at one point, Jamaleddin Al-Afghani was invited to create a lodge outside of their jurisdiction. So he went to the French, the Grand Orient of France, that permitted the discussion of politics, and established this lodge. I mean, we are talking about the guy whose disciples created the Muslim Brotherhood, who in turn created Hamas, who in turn used the manifesto cited the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which are created by the Sabbateans.
Yeah.
So,
and that's really important as well. And I know you point out a lot in yours is that the Sabbateans are using the Jewish people of the Jewish faith as a shield there to kind of take the flak for what they're doing. And a lot of people won't look at the Sabbateans, Sabbatean Frankists, obviously later on. But David talks about the Sabbateans, a few other people do, and I know you do, and that's really important.
Are also the ones, the Sabbatean Frankists, who took over Zionism. That was for the first couple of years a nationalistic idea of Theodor Herzl, and Theodor Herzl founded this World Jewish Zionist Congress that basically led to the establishment of Zionism. But before that, there was another organization known as the Alliance Israelite Universelle, which became very important before that. But having said that, it was the labor Zionists, the ones that actually were connected to the ideas of Karl Marx, the labor Zionists, which were basically the Sabbatean Frankists, who then became the prevailing faction that eventually led to the Balfour Declaration. And then, of course, there was before that the Sykes-Picot Agreement between the French and the English, because they had mined the whole of the Ottoman Empire with lodges to create a destabilization that will, in a way, make this Ottoman Empire collapse. And they actually managed. So today, we see all this chaos, and this chaos is basically the result of all this. When we say free Palestine, what are you going to free? That was part of the Ottoman Empire. So, I mean, you have to be realistic. It's not that one wants to be a Zionist. Zionist is something that needs to be specified. What kind of Zionist? And the Zionist that unfortunately became the prevailing form of Zionism in Israel is labor Zionism, and it's a Sabbatean Frankist creation. So the values were transmitted for example, the establishment of the kibbutz, which are socialist. I mean, that's a socialist hellhole, the kibbutz model.
So before we go, Leo, so what do the Sabbatean Frankists want with the Middle East and Solomon's Temple? And I know it obviously connects to the Freemasons, but what are they aiming for?
This goes before the Sabbatean Frankists, because the worst enemy of the Jews are the Jews. And this, any Jew can tell you that. Who established the Shia religion? Like I said in my book, it was a Jew. There was a Jew involved in the establishment of the Shia faction of Islam who went and headed the faction to establish the this new reality, because he wasn't happy with the representatives of Islam back then, and wanted to give the equal, if not superior, importance to Ali rather than Muhammad. So that started already there. The founder of the Fatimid dynasty was also partly Jew. There were 3,000 or 4,000 Jews within the order of assassins. When the order of assassins were fought, it was found out that 4,000 were Jews. So then at that point you say, but what kind of Jews are these? They were not traditional Jews. They were traitors to their own, and they were preceding the Sabbatean Frankists, because this goes back, like my friend Roseanne Barr taught me a long time ago, to the Erev Rav. The Erev Rav are a faction that basically was, when Moses came out of Egypt, he didn't bring out only the Jews. He showed all these miracles, he impressed the Pharaoh and all that, and the high priest of the Pharaoh, some of them from the Alexandria and the Memphis school of the Magi, said, we want to join you. So they joined. You can go and Google Erev Rav, and you will find who they are. And this Erev Rav faction are the one who were responsible for the golden calf. So nowadays, when you're talking, and of course, Moses got really pissed off because he broke the whole thing. I mean, that, he found, so he brought out of Egypt also these magicians, these Egyptian people that didn't have anything to do. And they become, of course, part, they started to live with the tribe and the part of the tribe. So when it comes to the Messianic Jews of today, they are a product of British Israelism. It was actually the Brits that encouraged over and over again the establishment of the Messianic Jews. Freemasonry wants to rebuild the Third Temple. That is the truth. Not only in an allegory, in a reality.
Yeah, of course. And there is a temple movement already.
But you can't blame the Jewish people for being in Israel and say from the river to the sea, when you have kicked their asses out of Europe with pogroms, the Holocaust, with all the bullshit of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, which needs to be interpreted as the protocols of the Sabbatean Elders of Zion. Then in that case, you will understand them better, because then you will have a full picture. But you kick their asses out of Europe. You don't give them any other possibility than going to Israel. Montefiore, Rothschild, go to Israel. And these people are in Israel now. What are you going to do with it? And they are surrounded by the enemy who hates them, because those people, always the same Freemasons, employed people like Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani, who's then, Jamal ad-Din al-Afghani, we go back to the Theosophical Society. Who brought the swastika to Adolf Hitler? The Theosophical Society. So we go always back to the same roots of all evil. We go back to Madame Blavatsky. We go back to the same people, to the Illuminati of the Western world, who arrived in Egypt, smoking copious amount of hashish with the local initiates, and starting their own revolution. Let's not forget that Madame Blavatsky, before founding the Theosophical Society, was in Cairo for a long time, and she founded another secret society. And of course, let's not forget that in the initiations of Aleister Crowley, you find two Islamic figures, Saladin and Mansur al-Alaj, which was possibly a Fatimid agent that was trying to destabilize Baghdad. In fact, his head was chopped off. And some say that was worshipped actually by the Sufis, and in secret also by the Templars, together with that Baphomet cross, which I finally reveal in this book, because the Baphomet cross is something that finally I'm showing in this book, thanks to my late friend Gabriele Mandelkan, because they don't have the courage to take it out of the depot in Istanbul and show it in a museum, because they're afraid that that museum will be blown up. Because if you put a representation of Muhammad, which is forbidden, on a cross, that is suicide. But the Shia Nizaris, the Ashashins, were no regular Muslims. They had been founded by Hassani Sabah, who had been initiated in the Cairo Lodge under the Fatimid dynasty. They had 9 degrees of initiation in the Cairo Lodge. And Hassani Sabah eventually managed to climb on top of this system. He pissed off somebody from the military in the Fatimid there in their own military, and then he had to flee, and he left, and then eventually he will establish the fortress of Alamut, where nothing is true and everything is permitted. So that is his motto, no?
Do what thou wilt, basically. Yeah.
And do
I
what
just
thou
it
yes,
comes from there. So
let's not forget
just
that
before I go,
Crowley called himself Baphomet.
well, he did, and then obviously most people who look at Baphomet will see the almost pan-like image of the goat, but the one that we'll show on the screen here is a completely different version of that, or different image of that, and that will shock a lot of people.
But if you go and study the esoteric significance of a cross, if you go and study why they were placing Muhammad on a cross, then there is actually some similarities with the later Baphomet that reflects below what is above, and that, of course, is within a hermetic teachings that were actually, as we said, just preserved in the city of Haran. And we know also that the Rosicrucians themselves claim to, with the Fama Fraternitatis, Christian Rosenkreuz having left Cyprus and gone through the Middle East and initiated to their knowledge. And in Fez, he was also initiated to the knowledge of these elemental beings. So it's not about only Paracelsus, but it's also about the genies. So my book is trying to bring finally the understanding. And today we only scratch the surface, to tell you the truth, because then we have also the influence it had on Adolf Hitler, because then you have on Adolf Hitler influenced by the uncle of Arafat, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who actually inspired the Holocaust. So what is happening in the Middle East? Of course, a lot of people say, Zagami Zazayan. I'm not saying Zagami Zazayan. I'm saying just that Arafat was his uncle was the guy who hung out with Adolf Hitler and inspired the Holocaust. Isn't that something that should make us a little bit worried?
It's so complicated and so convoluted that to pick it apart would take months, and I don't think we're even going to get there. Then, and obviously everybody will argue over it for thousands of years.
And then you have Hitler, who is initiated in the Thule-Gesellschaft by Rudolf von Sembotendorf, who publishes the secret rituals of the Turkish Sufi Freemasons, which in reality were given to him by these Domhe, these Sabbatians in Salonico. He was initiated into the Memphis Rite, which, as I described in my book, was very popular in Egypt. So this story is very complex, but I think that if you get the book and you go through the book, you also realize that LeoZagami has elaborated it in a way that it makes it digestible and understandable, because even my mother, and I tell you, my mother has always been very critic towards my books, because, you know, she's a great reader. She's English, she's a great reader. But she spoke with me yesterday and said, Leo, this is the first book that really, apart from being timely and important for what the times we're living now, but it's more easy to understand. And I said, well, it's great that you're telling me it's more easy to understand when the actual subjects are totally more complex than the other ones.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's amazing. And we know that just look at someone like Elon Musk and transhumanism, and we need to get into that, and the fact that he's funded by the Saudi royals and the Qatar national funds. There's a lot going on there that people aren't talking about in terms of that situation, and maybe we can get into there one day. So what was the one thing?
In my book, I talk about cyber Satan, but in the end, you know, the algorithms were a product of Islam. Algorithm is a word that comes from an Islamic guy. So it's only natural that now they want to become the biggest financiers of artificial intelligence, and they want to have Robocops around the Emirates. So it's like going back home, you know?
And everybody is looking towards China for that as well, and not looking that way. And it's fascinating. And what was the one thing that you would want people to take away from the book before you go? I know that's a difficult question, but
Yes,
what is
no,
that
it's
one
simple.
thing?
It's actually simple. That nobody, neither the Muslim, finally the Muslims will know that, because I've been in the Middle East, I've been in Turkey, I know that they love a conspiracy. They always love to blame though the same. The Crusaders, they are Freemasons. No, guys, here you have Freemasons who are Muslims, who are actually important for the Muslim tradition. And you are not revealing their Freemasons out of convenience to only blame one side. So nobody has the moral and higher ground respect to the other. Christians, Jews, and Muslims need to make peace with their heads, like we say in Rome. You are all sinners, and you have to, at this point, go in front of a mirror and criticize your own self before you can criticize others. You have to make order in your own house before you go and break the balls to other people saying, this, that, America, this. When they say 9/11 is an inside job, like I say in my book, it's an inside-out job. It would not have been possible with that ancient alliance that brings us back to the Assassins and the Knights Templars. So their modern heirs are basically destabilizing the world, putting people against each other, and then people, of course, are dancing around the towns of Middle East. Great, 9/11, the Twin Towers goes down. They're all happy. Idiots. Idiots. It's nothing to be happy about, because you're being played in an eternal game of hate. So my message is read this book, because this book eventually wants to bring peace and understanding. Thank you for giving me your time, Rich.
Absolutely. And I think that goes for people that look into conspiracies as well, is that you can look out there and blame the Illuminati, you can blame the Bavarian Illuminati, Sabbatean Frankists, and all of these other guys. But at the end of the day, just be nice to your people around you and do your bit. And I think that's a nice way of ending it.
Yeah,
Leo,
you
where
can
can
blame it.
yeah.
You can blame the Bavarian Illuminati, but if you're English, you should blame your royal family first of all,
Oh,
and your
trust me.
own military industrial complex before you open your mouth. Because I had my own English relatives in Cairo 100 years ago working for military intelligence, so I know exactly what they were doing. And I tell you, they were very dirty, and
Yeah.
they're very dirty what they have done over there, and they
Yeah.
should be ashamed. I'm half English, and I tell you, I'm ashamed for
The
what they have
British
done.
Royals here, yeah, the people in the England living here don't think much of the British Royals at all. Say British Royals, obviously, that with the
No, but
speech marks
it's
around
about
it. But
British imperialism. You had an empire. You were responsible for those things. You were responsible, and now you want to blame others. People like to say, "Oh, Al Qaeda, ISIS, they were created by the CIA." The CIA didn't exist when the Muslim Brotherhood was created in 1928 by Al Banna. The British exist. So take your own responsibility before you criticize others. Absolutely. Then, of course, the CIA came after the Second World War. They went to Saudi Arabia, introduced by the Brits. They made deals for the oil. There is the whole Al Yamama thing, which I discussed in my book, also how financing the terrorists by surplus in oil prices and all that. And the weapons couldn't be sold by America, so then they were sold conveniently by England. Guys, we have to be honest here. These people are kept in a third world condition because of us. And so, what kind of world are we creating here? We want to keep these third world countries eternally in their third world condition because then we can, play the part of the... No, it doesn't work that way. I hope that in the future the world is a more there is more equilibrium in the world and more honesty.
so, Leo,
Oh,
where can people find your book and all your volumes
okay.
of Confessions of Illuminati?
You can find my book, link to leozagami.com, all my latest articles. You can find it, of course, on Amazon. It's volume 10, Islamic Freemasonry and the Secret Societies Behind Eternal Conflict in the Middle East. And it's my own small personal contribution to make some clarity and hopefully bring some kind of better understanding of things. And I hope that there is also less people that come out attacking me before they actually read the book. You read the book, then you can criticize me. Don't open your mouth, start saying, Zagami science, Zagami this, Zagami that. Read the book, then you can write to me and I will talk to you. Because it doesn't make any sense to criticize people without reading. And you read 20% of the book and you saw how complex it is. How is it possible for somebody to understand the content of this book just by a book presentation on the internet or by a review or anything? You have to actually read it.
Yeah, you have to read it. You have to read it, and you have to read it many times over.
Yeah, and when you read the whole book, maybe in the future, you can call me again and we can have another chat.
Absolutely. Of course we can. Thank you for your time. And guys, remember to do your own research, come to your own conclusions. We will see you in a week's time here on Ickonic.com. Take care. Goodbye.